Episode 7, Season 40, Winners at War. Yeah, some of the winners at war. Not the original innovator. Oi, right? Oh my gosh. As these people play and as the series unfolds, it becomes, I know you'll say this is ego, more and more evident I needed to be there. But we knew that, didn't we? At least I did. I don't know. Yeah, I know some of you give me lots of shit for my ego, but listen, I understood how to play the game then. I understand how to play the game now, and as I watch season 7, I think they needed me badly, and I'll explain why more in this session here. Well, season 7 starts with Sandra saying how her approach bit her in the butt. Yeah, it did. And she goes on a little bit to explain how she told herself she was not going to play with her emotions. But that's an example of how even skilled players often slip. Their emotions undermine their gameplay. Now, I don't know how much of this is true or how much of this is just Sandra's self-perception, where she talked about having feelings for Denise, and they kind of caused her to offer Denise that immunity idol. That doesn't sound very Sandra to me. And as an afterthought, after she's voted out, I could see how she might rely on that psychologically to comfort herself a little bit. Well, I was feeling for Denise. That's why I did that silly thing, giving her an immunity idol. Oh my God! Anyway, she did give her the immunity idol, and as we talked about, Denise really, really, really rocked it, thinking through what would be a great move. And that was a great, great, great move. We'll talk a little bit more about Sandra in a minute because there's already all kinds of drama on the internet about Sandra's choices. And I'll give you my spin sometime during this little babble.
Thoughts? Anybody about Sandra sitting out of the game?
Yeah, that's my comment to myself. So that's what she did. Sandra sat out challenge after challenge after challenge. And if you heard in her commentary to other folks on Edge of Extinction and even in her confessionals to us, to the viewers, she refers repeatedly to I'm not very good in challenges. I don't do challenges very. I'm not that great at challenges. Well, all it takes is a little bit of repetition, and anyone can convince themselves of something like that. The problem is, no two challenges are the same. The players are different. The level of energy in each of the folks is different. The game itself, the challenge itself, has different components. The weather is different. And so the idea that you would lock yourself into an I'm not good at challenges perspective and think that about yourself winds up as what happened last night, where you end up sitting out of the game. Do I understand why she did it? Absolutely. I know Sandra pretty well, and I understand that she was probably exhausted. Remember, she'd just come from 39, so she'd been out there that whole time for season 39. Here she is out there for 40 again. She'd already won twice, as she said. She was unlikely to win the jury vote if she were the one coming back in from Edge of Extinction. However, the problem with that mindset is similar to her thinking she's not good at challenges. Imagine if in some really exciting way she won her way back in from the edge of extinction. Imagine if these fire tokens come into play and somehow she was able to finagle more of them than other folks. None of this could be known. All of those things are possible. And yet, whatever it was about her emotional instability, her exhaustion, whatever it was about where Sandra happened to be at that point in time, she was just done. She was just done. And this, again, goes to how difficult it is. I know you superfans aren't unsophisticated. I know many of you have thought through all kinds of things. But just as I criticize Probst for thinking he understands the game when I don't believe he does, because he hasn't played it, there are dynamics that nobody can really fully, completely grasp without being immersed in it and having something important to you on the line. That's what played out here. You've seen Sandra. You understand the joy with which she plays the game and the ways in which she feels she's capable of maneuvering through the game. But it gets tough when you, and much tough, it's tough already, but it gets much tougher when you start to lose hope and you've got these negative ideas in mind about what the next days are going to be like, what starving is going to be like, what the being exposed to the elements is going to be like. Never mind, did you see her something talking about going to the top of that mountain for dragging firewood or whatever? You know, she was just done, right? So I hope, regardless of what you think about her choice, and I accept the argument that you send a player to Survivor and you give them that slot. Believe me, I didn't get it, and I should have for this season. It's difficult to watch somebody give up even a small opportunity to come back in and to take the prize. Imagine if she'd won a third time. I know you probably can't, because somebody who would make this choice isn't prepared to win a third time. But you'll never know. And I don't think Sandra's one who will second guess herself and feel bad about her decision. I think she's probably thought it through and will live her life comfortably. But, woo, that's a toughie, right? Pulling out at the end when you had all that game left to unfold and you didn't know what it would be. You didn't know how the fire tokens would play out. You didn't know what you'd encounter on Edge of Extinction. You didn't know how it would flip. Ooh, crazy. I couldn't have done it. I could not have, as much as I may have wanted to raise the flag, get me the hell out of here. On a physical comfort level, I could never have done it, knowing that there was some possibility that I could have wrangled my way back into the game and potentially won. It's just not in me. And this leads me to the idea of fire tokens this season. I hope you're still contemplating their impact. It's really interesting to me that we don't yet know how they're going to play out. And all kinds of people have all kinds of ideas. But imagine if your accumulation of these fire tokens on Edge of Extinction leads you to really, really beneficial extras, whether they're clues or whether they're actually really physical advancements in the game somehow, or elimination of other players. I mean, you just never know what these tokens are going to lead to. And I think people should be very, very wary about how important they're going to be. The number of fire tokens available on Edge of Extinction this episode, again, it just adds fuel to that fire that these things could play out in a really important way. What happens if one person ends up with an extraordinary larger number of them than the other players? Are they just automatically back in to the game? Can they buy advantages that are likely to make it unlikely that they can't get back in? We don't know. I just know that they're probably going to be very important. So I'm watching. When Yule now is talking to Wendell about being concerned with respect to how Wendell engaged during tribal council. I hope you followed all that. I'm sure you did, but for those of you who are maybe missing a point or two, the idea that Wendell would have suggested to Parvati, go ahead, give me an idea, make me an offer, it does exactly what Yule is trying to communicate to him, and that is that it puts Wendell at a disadvantage. It undermines, it can't do anything but undermine some of the trust in Wendell that others may have in him or may have had in him prior to hearing him offer Parvati some kind of partnership. Even if Wendell were doing that as strategy and he wasn't actually going to accept whatever Parvati offered, for him to say it the way he did and then to not have some kind of an answer, some kind of an automatic response that, oh, dude, I was just getting information out of her for all of us. You know, I would never take any offer she made, but heck, we could have gotten more tokens. We could have gotten this. We could have learned X, Y, Z. There are lots of things Wendell could have said, and there are lots of things Wendell did this episode which are not good gameplay. I hope you saw them. I'm frightened, really, for Wendell's chances, given what we've seen him do during this episode. As the episode unfolds, the way he treats Michelle, the way in which his demeanor is emotional, the way in which his answers aren't well thought through. Yule explains well to us in this interaction that I'm talking about now, how when he tried to help Wendell understand it, Wendell still didn't deny it, didn't even seem to understand how the impact would be as negative as it likely is. That's sad for Wendell. But it is good to watch Yule make an effort with one of his alliance members. I do like that.
Subtle, important point. You guys who really pay attention to this game, I'm still talking about Wendell here. Wendell was responding to Yule, and he says to Yule, look, that's the way I treat my friends. Remember, he's talking in tribal council about the way he interacted with Parvati. It's about honesty, he said. That's the way I treat my friends. At that point, my perception of Wendell as a survivor player fell through the basement. Done. That is pure evidence Wendell doesn't get it. So when you look at the emotion and the disdain with which he engages Michelle, and you think about the negative kind of nonverbal signals he sends, he caps it off right here when he tells Yule that the way in which he was interacting with Parvati was about honesty. That's the way I treat. I like to be direct with my friends. I like to be honest. So do I. I don't know anybody more direct or honest than I like to be. I really don't. That's just the way I live my life. That is not the way I play Survivor. You can't, as a successful Survivor player, play the game using the same set of tools you rely on and believe in as a human being in society. The game is different. It has different rules. Outwit, outlast, outplay require that you use your brain and your skill set differently than you do when you engage normally. That's why there's $2 million at stake. You're supposed to be an incredible player who gets the game, who plays on a knife's edge, who really sharply understands what's unfolding and reacts to those things instantaneously. Oh, so frustrating, right? I hope you saw it. I know it's a subtle thing, but when Wendell talks about his reasoning for acting the way he did and for saying the things he said as being him proud of being honest, he's lost me. He's lost everything I thought about how he could play the game. He's not playing well. That is not good game play at all.
Yeah, this is bad. This is Wendell missing the point of the game. Wendell's tone with Michelle in front of you all. It's just awful, and it really undermines his game. Let me play my game. He's missing it. He sounds like Russell.
Did you hear that last night in my voice memo? I said he sounds like Russell. That's really how strongly I feel about the way Wendell's game was unfolding at this moment. His defensiveness, his tone, his negativity, his misunderstanding of the game itself. Huh. Is that a compliment to Russell? No. It's a relation to Russell's inability to play the game well, too. That's just the way it is. Good on you, Russell. I mean, good on you, Wendell. You're living up to Russell's standards. Yay! Oh, sorry. I get excited about this silly stuff, but I would much rather watch people really, really play hard and well without losing it this way.
I love my Ethan. He's feeling depressed and defeated and wondering why he's in this in-between world of Edge of Extinction. It's tough. You can see the emotion in his eyes.
So, Ethan is a really good friend of mine. He's just a good man. He's a good human being. He's also a good Survivor player. And watching him on Edge of Extinction talk very openly in his confessionals, and to Parvati, who's also a close friend of his, about how he's feeling, it was real. I love moments like that where the connection with the viewers, what's being shown in the confessional is sincere. And it's why you love Ethan. It's why I love Ethan. It's him. You know, he's a competitor. He's going to compete. He's really going to give it his all. But he's expressing very articulately, I think, the overwhelming difficulty where you're caught in Edge of Extinction, not really knowing where things are heading, already processing and trying to understand why you're out of the main game. It's a difficult emotional place to be. And he has the physical concerns associated with having, made it through Hodgkin's lymphoma twice. It's heartwarming to watch, and I just love him. He's just a good, good man. I love that Parvati is so supportive, and love the way in which she buoys him. That was great. Doesn't have a lot to do with the game, but I hope it helps you see what people wrestle with while amidst the game. It's not just about figuring out what move to make. It's about managing the ways in which you end up feeling that are oftentimes outside your control. And it's those emotions that sometimes undermine good gameplay. It's crazy, this Survivor. Crazy. Edge of Extinction. They're reading their little scrolls. Voomp. There are 4 fire tokens available at the top of the hill. Boom! They scurry. Fun to watch, right? I actually really enjoyed the editing, too. The way in which we saw Tyson find a fire token was fun. To not know that even though Rob had scampered up ahead of time, he had gotten any. The idea that he got 3, kudos to him. Everybody else thinking he was portly, out of breath, wasn't going to get there, wasn't going to help his chances any to get to the top first. they're not thinking very well. Waiting, looking to see what other people are going to do, that's not Survivor. Getting out ahead of the game, getting up there, figuring out what you can see, if anything. And then again, really, really intelligently, I love that Rob didn't share that he had found any. What does he do? Strip. Down go the pants. Down go whatever. Yeah, check. I don't have anything. Yeah, let's do a search. Let's do a pat down. Good for him. That was a good performance. That, I think, resulted in the other players believing Rob had not found any. He's good at pretending to be frustrated. He's good at communicating things that he wants others to believe. That's a good skill in Survivor. And Tyson wasn't good at keeping that to himself. He wasn't good at using that information in the most effective way possible. So here he is, he found a fire token, and what's the first thing he does? Tells somebody because he's excited, I found a fire token. Here's what they look like. That's not the way you play Survivor successfully. I'm sounding overconfident about that now because I don't know how this unfolds, and if Tyson is seen to get benefits from this type of gameplay, I would be shocked. But I don't think that's going to happen. Love me some Tony, right? How can you not? He's great TV. He's fun to watch. It's frustrating sometimes to feel so out of control, like almost anything can happen. I say almost. Anything can happen with him, which is fun. Tony talking about Denise's choices and how Denise now might be perceived as a threat. I think that is good to consider. I don't think it's good to rely on that concept or to believe that she really will be that much more of a target as Tony so confidently seems to think right now. I like Jeremy's take on the situation. I think Jeremy recognizes Tony is a threat. I've talked in the past couple of episodes about Tony's position in the game. And my thought of how threatening he is as a potential winner comes from the idea that people are overlooking him because it's just Tony. Tony's frenetic. Tony does this. Tony's crazy. Wild Tony. All those things are true, and all of those things could be an Achilles heel for Tony. He could screw up in the midst of his luck searching, his frenetic kind of running back and forth and wondering which way to go and changing his mind in the last minute. All of those things could become problematic for Tony. The flip side of that, though, I love seeing Jeremy recognize, is that Tony is adaptable. He does, in the midst of that frenetic play, eventually get to choices that work for him. Even if he's made bad ones, he flips them and switches and turns it around. And that is intriguing. I wonder where it's going to take him. If others besides Jeremy don't recognize Tony is more of a threat, we're in for Tony setting himself up to win. I'm telling you, it's a fascinating game. Tony, isn't dumb. Tony has a personality that is a little high speed. Let's take the two cops. He and Sarah also have, Sarah does not have that high speed freneticism, but he and Sarah also have those police officer observation skills that are critical to being a good player. They're crucial in understanding who people are and watching how their nonverbals belie some of the things they're saying. It's really interesting to watch both of them play. But here, Tony's skills are somehow shadowed, somehow kind of set aside from, when people look superficially at him, his abilities because of his freneticism. They don't look. He doesn't look. He doesn't appear superficially as skillful as he actually is. Follow that? I hope I'm making some sense. I'm not talking in circles. There are things happening at the same time here where Tony is kind of making it through the game because he is perceived in a particularly frenetic way that is normal. That's how we know Tony. But under that are some very, very important skills in this game. Flip side of that, you watch Sarah, or Sophie, whatever, several other people, but Sarah particularly because she's a cop too, she has those skills. And she isn't covering them with the freneticism. She isn't obvious. She isn't doing anything necessarily wrong either. She's actually playing very well and cautiously. But I think people would notice her and her calmness and her observation and those skills that she has before they would notice the Tony, the jester, the almost cuckoo jester. He's so hectic and frenetic, it appears. But there's a lot going on underneath. Okay, a little bit of a tangent, but I wanted to help you see my perception of where things are there. Watching Kim and Denise converse in this same scene right after seeing Tony talk about Denise was interesting too. And just as I described Sarah having that kind of calm, or Sophie having that kind of calm understanding of the game, making sophisticated choices about how to move, so does Kim play. And Kim's a brilliant player. But she plays that way too. And here Kim is having a conversation with Denise. And so that's two kind of calm, observant players. It's that style of gameplay that if you aren't careful and you don't recognize that you'll be perceived as a threat because you aren't loose enough, not sufficiently playful, not appearing as off the cuff. No need to be Tony or that frenetic, but I'd be very, very careful, and I am concerned about the ways in which the calm players aren't, it doesn't appear to me, aware of how calm and calculated they're looking to the other players. Those kinds of subtleties are what other players pick up on as threats. If I don't know what's going on in them, if they aren't just kind of there on the surface showing me who they are, then I need to be concerned about what they might be planning and how they might undermine my gameplay as we move forward. It's a dangerous place to be when you are perceived as very, very competent in the game and are appearing very confident, or if not confident, calm, unaffected by what's happening around you. And Tony's looseness and freneticism helps in all kinds of ways to defray that kind of cost, the cost of being perceived as more of a threat. Complicated, right? Sophisticated. Love this stuff. It's all about who we are. Some of this applies in real life. Yeah, you're not out to undermine people, but the skills associated with understanding where people are, who people are, how they're impacting you and others are all valuable, and they can be used to embrace people and to uplift people in the real world, not out here. There's another time for that. Cut their throats. That's what Survivor's about, man. Oh, what a fun game. How about the Adam-Ben dynamic? Ben just warms my heart. He's just so cute. And the way in which he's interacting with Adam is fun for me to watch. Adam is disappointing me a little. I do understand that much of what I'm reacting to is communicated to us via his confessionals, so others aren't seeing him be as frustrated as he communicates there. But even in his interactions with other players, his level of frustration and the way in which he's communicating angst to other players and bringing up things that undermine his trustworthiness, his reliability, are problematic for him. He can't think that he's going to use people, connect with them, partner with them, rely on them, while he's coming at them defensively, wondering if they're doing this or doing that, and who has an idol. And I believe those two do, and they don't. And hardly even thinking about Sophie, really, who has it. He's making classic mistakes. Adam's never been more convinced that Ben or Sarah have an idol. They don't. Sophie has the idol. That kind of confidence, being convinced Ben or Sarah have the idol, isn't good for Adam or anyone. And the way in which he's expressing it, the way in which he's challenging them, obviously frustrating them, isn't benefiting his game. So in episode 7, in Winners at War season, shouldn't we be seeing more sophisticated gameplay? This idea of who's new school and who's old school, who's faster player, who's slower player, those terms can be used for certain distinctions about maybe age or time period over Survivor's lifespan. But I don't think they're as applicable to individuals with respect to the gameplay as most people are using them. I've talked a little bit about that before, and maybe I'll pull out my old school t-shirt and talk about it in a video on its own. We'll see. Adam having frustration over the idea that he has to do damage control now because he's speculated out loud to these other people about the idea that he thinks they have the idol. And now he's in a position where he's got to apologize and do damage control when he still thinks they have the idol, is evidence of how his mind is taking him down the wrong path. That kind of confidence, that inability to let go of what is bothering him. So what if they have the idol? That's the point. They should have been trying to get it and keep you from knowing they have it. You've got to be a little more playful. You've got to be a little less bothered on a real emotional internal level. It's a game that you're all playing. You've got to appreciate the idea that somebody else might do things that are good gameplay, playing well. You've got to respect that kind of game. Not sit there whining about it and showing your frustration in such a way that you end up having to backtrack and apologize and undermine. All of that takes away energy from playing the game in your best interests. How excited were you for this challenge? Carrying that water and watching Wendell get so close to the end. But even as the challenge was unfolding, I noticed, I hope you noticed, the edit included comments from Wendell. Don't think people aren't making comments throughout the game. But the comments Wendell was making were clearly cocky, clearly kind of distracting from his focus. And so as those comments were being made, I was thinking, oh, buddy, shut up, pay attention. And that was the point, I think, of those comments having been edited into what we saw. The challenges, as I keep saying, aren't really the biggest part of the game. How you play them and what you do within them may have some impact on what your teammates think of you, for sure. But the challenge overall isn't what the game is made of. It's not what the game is about, the real game of Survivor. So getting frustrated and being distracted while playing is not a good thing. And that's playing into the way I'm perceiving Wendell this season. It's something. So Wendell, Nick, Yul, and Michelle are headed for Tribal Council. the dynamics there. Fascinating. You know, Michelle has talked at length about being willing to get rid of Wendell, reminiscing about the way in which she was done wrong in their personal relationship outside the game. Now, this episode, talking about how she doesn't want to be duped again by him. I like her openness to possibilities. I love the way in which she openly engaged with Nick, giving him the opportunity to decide which way to head. Yule, Wendell, where do you want to go? Says Michelle. I'll go along. I'm open to either. I think if push came to shove, who's the bigger threat? For me, it's Yule, hands down. Why? Because Wendell isn't playing well. He's just not playing well. And so somebody like that, who's playing kind of obviously poorly and is likely to only become more frustrated as the game unfolds, will be an easier target, in my mind, later than would somebody like Yule, who would rally, who is playing intelligently, who's thoughtful. Again, this distinction of old school. He's the only what they call old school player left. But remember, we who they call old school players are perceived by many as not being able to play well or as well as new school players because they think new school players are faster and it's nonsense. Let them believe it. That's great. I think all the talk is wonderful. It makes me less of a threat were I ever to play the game again, because people are going to think these really, really silly things about old school versus new school players. First of all, we're not all the same. I never considered myself an equal or a similar player to many of the other winners prior to the new school taking over. But let's talk very, very briefly about how this season was set up. This is something I don't know how many fans even considered. But Yule, tonight, boom, he's voted out. He's the last old school player. All of the old school players having been voted out, why? There's much more to this game than viewers realize. And I hate to be so negative, and people will say, oh, it's, you're frustrated because they didn't have you on and all the rest of it. Yeah, I should have been part of season 40. But Probst doesn't understand the game. This is another stupid Probst decision that leads to all the old school players being voted out. It is not just about those folks not playing as well. We know some of them can play very, very well. Parvati's an incredible player, period. Yule's incredibly bright. It isn't about the game being too fast for them. It's about the setup. Probst started the game 12-8. 12 new schoolish folk, 8 old schoolish folk, if you want to talk about age and time that the games were played when these wins happened. Were Tina and I there, it would have been 10-10. Think about it. The only reason those old school players who are thought of as old school are all out in a row is the same reason that during All-Stars, the winners were voted out one after the other. That suggests there's more to the game than what we see. There is. CBS and Survivor certainly told people in the signing of these contracts that they were not allowed to interact prior to the game. They're not allowed to collude. They're not allowed to talk. Oh, for crying out loud. They did. Period. They talked, they planned, and the old school players were targeted. Hands down. When you have a setup that is unfair from the start and somebody in charge like Probst who isn't sufficiently aware, despite how close he is, how often he's been around the game, he still doesn't take into account the subtleties that make the game the best it could be. It's sad. And for him to have put the game into play with 12 folks already aligned against 8, there's no chance of them doing well unless they can crack through that 12. But that's tough. You're at a huge disadvantage to begin with. Yes, all of us individuals have individual advantages and disadvantages. But I think it's the executive producer's responsibility to the viewers, to the game itself, for it to be set up as fairly as possible. And it's unfortunate that the folks behind this show don't care about things like that. Here, we were set up to have some of the most interesting players voted out first because it was an unfair, uneven advantage from the outset that would have been corrected by the original innovator having been part of the game like he was supposed to have been, like I should have been. Enough said. Frustrating, right? I mean, just from the perspective of watching good gameplay. But anyway, that's done. I don't want to take away from your enjoyment of the season because it's a good season. It's still good gameplay. These people were all winners and we'll watch it unfold. That said, I want you to understand how the folks behind the game, Probst particularly, who is perceived as this easygoing guy, lets his ego and his incompetence, really, interfere with how well the game could be played. What did you think of Wendell and Michelle and that dynamic there? Do you think she should have stayed with Wendell and got rid of Yule? Do you think she should have gotten rid of Wendell when she had the chance? I think that external relationship and Michelle's understanding of Wendell created the opportunity for this choice, for her to keep Wendell in. She knows him. He's less of a wild card. I think it was smart of her to combine with Nick and get rid of Yule. Wendell, she can deal with any time, I think. So here I am just talking about old school versus new school. And Yule in Tribal Council goes on and on about how he is surprised at this game style, this game play. This is not evidence that I was wrong. This is evidence that the individual players are not able to be grouped or categorized identically to one another. You can't say all old school players play similarly or think similarly, and all new school players play similarly and think similarly. I don't think that way, and it bothers me to see someone I think of as bright, Yule, talking about how he didn't ever have to lie this much in his earlier season. Oh, for crying out loud. Just because you didn't have to do something doesn't mean that it wouldn't be a necessary thing, or you might have to do it more or less in another season. His explanation is again evidence of his not getting the game as well as he ought to. Who cares how much you might need to lie? It's not about not lying. It's not about some false sense of ethics within a game. I've explained this in years past. You don't go into a football game or chess, if you're playing chess with somebody, and at some point decide, you know, I better give a signal to the other person of what I'm honestly thinking and what I'm going to do next. That's absurd. There are rules to the game that prevent you, if you're a good player, from worrying about the ways in which you move through and across the football field, for example. If you can fake somebody out, do so. Get to the other end, touchdown. That's the goal. When you're done with the game, talk about how that happened, why it happened, etc. And drop those skills you had to utilize within the game. But within the game, this idea about being concerned because you lied more than you did in the first time you played is evidence of your lack of understanding of how to play the game and what it takes to be a skillful, long-lasting Survivor player. Sorry.
This This sucks, watching him talk like this, as if the game is so distinctly different from how I played it or would play it. And this is part of what angers me about not being in 40.
It's true. So if we are to think about the reason people group us into old school versus new school, Yule saying the kinds of things he did at Tribal about being shocked at how much more he had to lie, for example, is evidence that maybe there is more of a difference between old school and new school than I thought, or that I'm willing to admit. There isn't within me. I can play with these new schoolers in no different way than I would play the first time I was on the show. I would play in whatever ways situations required. That's Survivor. And understanding ahead of time what it takes to win the game and what I needed to be prepared to do is the preparation one needs to do to be on the field, to be in the game, to be ready to win and deserving of that win when you take everybody else's head off. It's just the way it is, man. Oh, it gets me so frustrated that people all these seasons later don't understand the game and appreciate it for what it is, and can't smile when they're taken out by somebody who's outplayed them. It's too bad, I think. But it's a learning experience. It's good for us, we viewers, the world, to watch Survivor and to see how we think as humans. We get ideas in our minds that aren't real, and we believe them confidently, which often crosses the line between ignorance, when we're not so aware of something or we don't have the information, and stupidity, when we don't have that information but we confidently articulate our position as if we do. That's just stupid.
Fire tokens may become very important later, but they aren't the game of Survivor. Challenges aren't the game of Survivor.
It's funny here at the end, in the same way that challenges aren't the most important aspect of the game of Survivor, this new twist, fire tokens, are not the most important aspect of the game. Is it appropriate to consider their value? Certainly. I've been talking about that the whole season. Is it necessary to plan for the possibility that they could create for you or for someone else an advantage that might be overwhelming? Sure. But here at the end, Yule's focus on the fire tokens and his lack of focus on how his scheming might be perceived as threatening to other players is evidence of his missing something, of his not playing as well as I had hoped Yule would have played. Yeah, if you can come up with an idea and make a suggestion that makes sense and helps people benefit, or you benefit without people knowing about it, then more power to you. Go for it. But to talk through some complicated situation in which there are possibilities that it might go wrong, etc., and to focus so much energy on tokens rather than on getting rid of somebody, and before you've actually gotten rid of them, so there's still a threat that you might be the one to go, you lose strength, you lose focus, you lose the confident possibility that that other person may go, as happened here. I think Yule's focus on fire tokens and his need to kind of communicate what ought to be done with respect to them and the possibilities of how that could be played out somewhat undermined his chances for staying in the game. And to whatever little extent that might have happened, it was a bad choice. And added to part of why he was gone. Shipped to edge of extinction in a heartbeat. A little earlier, I talked about those calculating, capable players. And who does Yule give his fire tokens to? One to Sophie and one to Sarah. those are two playing women. Those women are playing. They're there to play. They're playing the game. Their confidence is available. It's something you could recognize in their calmness. If you're a good player and you're watching, I hope you would be concerned about how well Sophie and Sarah are playing. Because they're good. What's Yule's thought, do you think? Why does he give each of them a fire token? Maybe we'll see as the game unfolds. Fun episode though, right? The season is good. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. I know you would have enjoyed it more were I there. Me too. Damn them! Damn them! Damn them! For Survivor's sake. Oh man, I wish I were stirring things up out there in Fiji. Oof. But at least now I have a little bit of a connection to you and can chat every now and then about what's going on in the game. Because I'm a fan, just like you. 80% of you who are listening to these videos have not subscribed to my channel. Please subscribe. Just hit the subscription button and hit the notification button and you'll be informed when I have another video up for you to listen to. After you've subscribed, comment. Comment positively, comment negatively. No holds barred. Just say what you're thinking. That's what will make our exchange even more valuable. As I'm able, I'll create new videos responsive to that commentary. So like away, or dislike, on that rare occasion you may feel the need to do so. But either way, thank you.